Good evening. I was going to talk to you about reconciliation tonight, but I feel this is a bit of a different crowd, and because I'm really pressed for time, I'm dispensing with some of my normal diplomacy, and I'll speak to you about my story with my community, and then I'll speak on our community, the one we're all a part of, and our engagement in that community and what it takes to effect change. As far as Tsawwassen history, it's a narrative like most other First Nations. It's a complex history full of cultural richness, of hard work and strong leadership, of lean times, of feasting and fighting. It's a story interrupted a short time ago by disease, economic exclusion, illegal land preemption, forcible removal and re-education of children, isolation, and outright racism. And where does that leave us now? For Tsawwassen, in the best health we've been in for 100 years, according to recent data, half of our adult community is earning less than $30,000 annually. Slightly over a third have full-time employment, and only 52% have attained a high school diploma, with 1% a university degree. And let me be absolutely clear, that's unacceptable. It's a preposterous situation, and one I reject with every ounce of my energy, every day of my life. We're a suburb of Canada's richest city, barely 30 minutes from the downtown core. We're on a major provincial highway, and we've got a massive economic generator, Delta Port, and the ferry terminal, both stuffed in our front yard. Never mind this, not my backyard business. There are 3 million people in the Lower Mainland. We're 400, and there isn't room for us all to share in this wealth. I refuse to accept that. I refused to accept it when I first learned of Canada and BC's poor history of Aboriginal relations leading from colonization when I was 20 and taking courses at Kwantlen College. I compared what I learned with what I saw every day in my community and the kinds of real impacts that history and current government decisions have had on our people. I asked myself how we could overcome the situation and challenged myself to do something about it. Over time, I became convinced that not only did we need a land claim that would provide us with land, resources, and cash to stimulate our economic development, but also that the only way we were going to be able to grow again as a people was to move away from the terrible, oppressive regime of the Indian Act as quickly as possible. From there, I worked on our treaty. 18 and a half years after I started work for my community, our treaty came into effect, and Tsawwassen First Nation kicked the Indian Act and the federal government off our lands forever. Now we're servicing the first 100 acres of our industrial lands in preparation for economic development and are evaluating residential and commercial development opportunities. We've got a bus route connecting us to the regional transit system and sit on the Metro Vancouver and TransLink governance bodies. We're finalizing a protocol with BC Ministry of Families to enhance child protection. We're strengthening the ability for police to enforce drug houses. We're reviewing our social assistance and education programs, looking at best practices in delivery. We've got our own culturally appropriate governance structures. The third session of our 13-member legislature began last night with an opening address by His Honour Lieutenant Governor Stephen Point, who I'm proud to claim as a fellow Coast Salish person. All of this is real change for my community. It isn't easy. It is gritty, dirty process that drags all the energy out of you. I faced the worst kinds of opposition from all fronts. You might think a treaty is a slam dunk for support from socially progressive types, but go to remove land from the agricultural land reserve, a requirement if we're going to catch up with all the billions worth of property assets developed in the rest of our territory, and you see how fast that changes, especially with the media putting you under the microscope. You know you're in tough when the mayor of your local municipality and Joe Foy of the Western Canada Wilderness Committee speak out against your treaty. You know you're in the trenches when you split the NDP caucus. What noble cause will they support? Protecting our farmland or supporting treaties? This is in addition to having one of our members collude with our right-wing MP John Cummins in an attempt to defeat our treaty, or having almost all of my First Nation peers opposed to some of the precedents that were being set in our treaty. But that's the point. Moving forward takes pragmatism and not letting the perfect get in the way of the good. Waiting for the perfect in Tsawwassen would have meant opting for the status quo and failing another generation of our people. Totally unacceptable. Which brings me to a question I have for you. What is your vision and what are you doing about it? Everywhere I go, I hear people complain about their public institutions. We're not happy with our governments, but our participation in these institutions, our personal engagement and commitment to them is lower than it has ever been. Why is it like this? Is it too hard for us to participate? Is the public life too hard for us and our families? For all the barriers you can imagine, I tell you this, I have faced most of them and then some. I'm not only a relatively young woman, I'm an Aboriginal woman chief of a Treaty First Nation. In each and every institution I participate in, including the Assembly of First Nations, the Metro Vancouver Board, the BC Hydro Board, the First Nations Summit, I have to carve out a space for myself to be taken seriously and to provide meaningful input. And as I have participated in these institutions new to me, I have come to see how First Nations have really been set up to fail. Our political and legal framework is grossly inadequate, and there are few opportunities for First Nations people to share our story, aside from the mostly negative and stereotypical media discourse. To move forward, I believe that First Nations must be integrated, not assimilated, but integrated into the federal and provincial political systems so people who govern our country can hear our stories from our mouths. I think that means guaranteed seats in Parliament, Senate, and the legislature, but I suppose that's another story for another time. I want to leave you by issuing a challenge to get involved and get engaged in your institutions. Change starts with a vision, but it doesn't end there. In the middle is a lot of hard work, a lot of learning and questions, and at the end, when you're successful, there's just more work. Find the strength to get involved. Yes, it takes time, patience, and yes, even compromise, but it is very possible for each of you. My strength comes from my dream for my community, that my 3 beautiful daughters, tucking themselves into bed about now, just a stone's throw away from our ancient longhouse site, will live a narrative as bright and as rich as my ancestors. Thank you.